Have you ever watched a new sales rep finish onboarding only to realize that the first time they speak to a real customer, they are simply not ready? They have completed the training, they've sat through the workshops, they've passed every module. The first discovery call feels awkward, the first call calls lacks confidence, or the first meeting ends without a clear next steps. If you've ever experienced that, you're not alone. I think it's one of the biggest problems with how many organizations approach sales onboarding today. Too often we judge onboarding by what people have completed rather than what they are actually ready to do. Over the years, I have onboarded thousands of sellers across different organizations. Looking back, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that onboarding isn't really about transferring knowledge. It's about helping someone become capable of performing the next important part of their job. That's exactly what I want to explore in this video. It's based on my complete sales onboarding guide, which I'll link below, together with a one-pager that summarizes the measurement side of onboarding and the broader framework. The full guide goes much deeper into the overall model, certification, scorecard, onboarding metrics, and maturity journey. Here, though, I want to keep things more concise and practical. The entire approach is built around the idea that you should stop thinking about onboarding as a training program with a fixed timeline and start thinking about it as a structured ramp system. In the guide, I break the system into 3 phases. The number 1 is prepare, which covers everything from accepting the offer through to the first prospect-facing activity. The second one is perform, which focuses on helping the seller progress from their first customer interaction to their first independently managed deal. And third, perfect, which shifts the focus towards repeated quota attainment through coaching and continuous development. But don't worry, you don't need to redesign your entire onboarding program to start applying this. Everything begins with a better way to focus your energy and attention. So instead of asking, what should we teach new hires? Ask yourself, what does this seller need to be ready to do next? This small shift in perspective changes almost every decision you make about onboarding, and it's where I'll encourage every enablement performance improvement team or professional to start. So the first step lies in the first meaningful customer-facing activity the seller needs to perform. That's something I want to emphasize. For an SDR, they may be the first outbound call or the first outbound sequence. For an AE, it may be the first discovery call. For an account manager, it may be the first renewal risk conversation or expansion discussion. Once you choose that activity, work backwards by asking yourself, what must the rep know, practice, and prove before they can do this live? It's a simple question that helps you focus and reduce noise. For example, if you're onboarding a new SDR and the first meaningful activity is a cold call, they probably need to understand the ICP, the buyer personas, the value proposition, the basic call structure, the most common objection, and any relevant tool workflows. They do not need every product feature right now. They do not need advanced pricing. They do not need every CRM workflow. They need enough context and practice to take the first step safely and usefully. The same logic applies to an AE. If the first critical activity is discovery, the rep needs to understand the buyer, the qualification framework, the problem areas to explore, the discovery question they should be able to ask, the value proposition, and what a strong next steps looks like from that stage. They might not need advanced negotiation training in week 1 or 2. That can come later. This is why the prepare phase of the guide is so useful as the starting point, because it helps you decide what belongs early in onboarding by connecting learning to the job the rep needs to do and perform. So start with one role. Choose one or a few customer-facing activities. Define the jobs to be done for those activities. Identify the minimum knowledge and skill required. Define what ready enough to try looks like, then decide how the manager will observe, coach, and reinforce it. So the smallest useful output you could produce from this initial step is a first activity readiness map. It can be a one-page working document that defines what a seller must learn, practice, and demonstrate before their first real customer-facing activity. The point here is to create one clear bridge between onboarding content, training, and real execution. A simple readiness map could include the role, the first prospect-facing activity, the jobs to be done, the minimum knowledge required, the practice activity, the readiness check, the manager reinforcement action, and the early performance signals you will expect. But let me make this concrete with an example. Imagine the role is SDR. The first activity is the first outbound call. The jobs to be done might be identify the right account, open the call, create relevance, ask a few useful questions, and agree a clear next step. The minimum knowledge might be the ICP, buyer persona, value proposition, call opener, and common objections. The practice activity could be 25 structured role plays across common outbound scenarios with increasing difficulty. The readiness checks could be a manager or enablement assessment using a standard scorecard. That scorecard might cover call opening, relevance, questioning, and next step clarity. The manager reinforcement action could be listening to the first 5 live calls and giving structured feedback using the same scorecard. And the early performance signal could be meeting conversion rate, call quality scored, and activity levels. This is already very useful because it gives the rep clarity, it gives the manager a coaching reference point, it gives enablement a way to inspect readiness over time, and it gives the business a better indication than the rep completed the onboarding modules, which it doesn't tell fully like where the actual person is ready to perform. Now, the full sales onboarding model can be quite advanced. You can have like role-specific tracks, milestone-based progression, basic and advanced certification, scorecard across multiple sales activities, manager coaching rhythms, cohort reporting, and time to ramp analysis. And there may be the right direction over time, but it's probably not the right first step. If you're building onboarding from scratch, you have a small enablement team, probably keep the model light. Focus on 3 questions. What is the first meaningful customer activity the rep must perform? What must they learn and practice before doing it? And will the manager reinforce the actual learning and the desired behavior? Based on this, a good first version might include 1 onboarding checklist, 1 readiness map, 1 manager coaching guide, and 1 monthly review of ramp signals. The most important thing you need to make progress is a clear connection between learning, practice, inspection, and reinforcement. If you already have a structured onboarding program, dedicated enablement support, and active manager involvement, then you can run the model across the 3 phases that I already mentioned. In the prepare phase, you can define what must happen before the first prospecting activity. In the perform phase, you can develop onboarding further and track progress from first customer activity to multiple other activities to the first independently managed deals. Then, in the perfect phase, you can shift the emphasis towards repeat quota attainment, ongoing coaching, and performance inspection. At that point, you may introduce role-specific onboarding tracks, certifications, additional scorecard for core sales activities, the rhythms that the manager need to follow, the core level reporting, and the time to ramp analysis. But the logic stays the same. You do not add complexity unless it improves readiness or performance. You should also adapt the milestone to your sales motion. For high-velocity SDR team, the focus may be prospecting, messaging, objection handling, and meeting conversion. For an enterprise AE team, the focus may be discovery, qualification, stakeholder mapping, business case development, mutual action planning, and executive communication. And for longer sales cycle, you may not want to wait for a close-won deal before you assess progress. In that case, you use proxy milestone, which could be first qualified opportunity created, the first discovery call completed to standard, the first business case drafted, or the first manager approved deal strategy. So the key here is to preserve the structure of the model, but adapt the milestones to the reality of your sales process. From this video, the next step I recommend is to run a 45 minutes onboarding review for 1 sales role. You choose 1 role and keep the review focused. For example, choose new SMB AEs. Then identify the first 3 moments that are most critical for their role. For the role, those moments might be the first prospecting activity, the first discovery call, and the next conversation following that discovery. Once again, for each moment, you want to ask 3 questions. What does the rep need to know? What does the rep need to practice? What does the rep need to prove before doing this live? Once you have those answers, compare them with your current onboarding, assuming you have something already in place, and you ask yourself what is already covered, what is missing, what is not being practiced, what is not being inspected before reps performing live. So this process will allow you to spot the actual gaps. For example, you may realize that reps attend discovery training, but no one checks whether they can ask strong problem, impact, and decision question before their first live discovery call. You now have a very specific gap to fix. The small improvement could be a 20-minute discovery readiness check before the first live discovery call. The readiness check might include 5 simple steps. The rep explains the target persona. The rep prepares 5 discovery questions. The rep completes a 10-minute role play. The manager or enablement evaluates the conversation using a standard scorecard. Then the rep receives 1 clear coaching action that could support them for their live call. It may seem very basic, right? But I guarantee you that this approach will be enough as a starting point to significantly improve the quality of your onboarding. And once it works for one activity, you repeat the same process for the next activity, which is how you build the system without trying to build everything at once. Now, the main takeaway I want to leave you with is that sales onboarding improves when you stop designing around training completion and start designing around readiness for the next meaningful customer activities. Start with 1 role, 1 activity, 1 readiness map, and 1 manager enforcement loop, then expand from there. The full sales onboarding guide, 1-pager, and the related resources are linked below. They go deeper into the 3 onboarding phases, the certification logic, the scorecard approach, onboarding metrics, the maturity journey as well, if you want to build this into a more complete system. So thank you for staying with me all the way through, and I hope you find this useful. I'll see you in the next video.